What's up, YouTube? It's time for a review of the new Sepultura record, Machine Messiah, out this past Friday, January 13th. So this is now the legendary band's 14th studio album overall, and their 8th now since co-founder and frontman Max Cavalera left the band and was replaced by Derek Green. And it's also the 4th album now to not feature a Cavalera at all, since Igor, Max's brother and their longtime drummer, also left the band. Believe it or not, this is actually the first Sepultura album without Max Cavalera that I'm giving a shot. Even though as a kid, Sepultura were one of my favorite bands. I guess I always felt like all you need to know about Sepultura was Beneath the Remains, Arise, Chaos AD, and Roots. And it was just so strange. I just couldn't picture the band with a different voice. Even though these Derek Green albums have always been on my radar, I especially remember their last record making a lot of year-end 2013 lists. So my curiosity got the best of me this time around, and I just hit play. And right off the bat, the opening title track was not what I expected to hear at all. It begins with some clean guitar, and then some solemn twin guitar harmonies over it, and then Derek Green comes in with this bellowing baritone that caught me off guard, but it eventually gives way to the vocal style that he uses for most of the record, which I'd say is a hybrid between thrash vocals and industrial metal vocals. At times, he definitely reminds me of Justin Broderick from Godflesh or Burton from Fear Factory. But as an opener, Machine Messiah is grand and epic and dramatic, and the band really commit to the idea of the intro song, because even though this is a fully structured song, it's got a much more steady kind of building pace as opposed to the rest of the record, which we'll get into. But yeah, I love this track. I love this track. It is a completely different band than the band that made Arise or Chaos ID or really any of the music that I beat to death as a kid. But it's good. I should also note that lyrically, Machine Messiah touches on the dangers of technological advancement and how we need to tread carefully as not to become basically dependent on machines. In this song, the abstract Machine Messiah promises that he'll keep you safe, he'll give you everything, but eventually you end up helpless on your knees in front of him. So moving on to the next track, I Am the Enemy, it's a big shift. It's furiously paced thrash with a notable extreme metal and death metal influence. It's got a killer galloping breakdown, a shredding solo. It's really just a punishing track. I definitely dig this track musically, but I will mention that the lyrics here don't really do much for me because they seem to serve more of a percussive purpose the way Derek Green delivers them, with these emphatic divisions of syllables that really just react in response to the riffs, as opposed to delivering some sort of message or making some sort of statement. And this especially becomes apparent later on with the verses to the track Phantom Self, but I digress. So then on the back end of this album's track list, the band continue with this extreme metal infused thrash with songs like Silent Violence and Vandals Nest. Vandals Nest definitely being my favorite of those two songs. It kicks off with just this totally old school thrash riff, the most blatantly 80s of any of the thrashy parts on this album, and it was refreshingly stripped down for me. Then after that old school thrash intro, there's some moshy, hardcore riffage in the chorus, and in the bridge section, Derek Green employs these gruff, clean vocals, which just keep the track interesting, and aside from the title track, definitely result in the coolest vocal passage on the album. It's just an airtight song where you feel like all 2 minutes and 47 seconds are being used efficiently and effectively. Now, you might be wondering, why did I discuss the first couple tracks in the track list and then jump all the way to tracks 8 and 9 without touching on the middle of the album? Well, unlike I Am the Enemy or Silent Violence or Vandals Nest, there's a bunch of tracks in the middle of the track listing that really do something different. The band incorporate a prominent symphonic component to a bunch of these tracks in the middle, like the song Sworn Oath, which is pretty sick. It first spends about a minute just building tension until it launches into what eventually becomes the chorus, this big sweeping string arrangement with machine gun double bass underneath it. Just the sound of it is enormous, and it's a vastly different ballgame than the songs that we've previously talked about. I will admit that coming out of that initial symphonic blast into that dinky little lightweight early 90s Megadeth riff that happens at 125. That kind of feels like a bit of a letdown. But generally, the riffs do pair very well with the string arrangements, and eventually the undeniable climax is that orgasmic, harmonized guitar solo that's backed by strings that occurs at about the 4 minute and 10 seconds mark. And it's also a part that the band do a phenomenal job building up to in the 30 seconds prior. The following track, Resistant Parasites, also makes use of these added string arrangements in parts, like the post-chorus section that occurs at about 1 minute 48 seconds in, which just sounds like straight symphonic death metal. It sounds like something off of like a Flesh God Apocalypse record. And the thing about Resistant Parasites is that even without these cinematic tack-ons, it's already just a really strong track. Big groove metal vibe to some of it, like the chorus riff in particular brings Machine Head to mind for me. Just the way the vibrato and the guitars really make the riff just snarl. And this song also contains my favorite riff on the whole album. It first appears at about 2 minutes and 10 seconds, and then it later reappears as the background to that exotic second guitar solo that occurs at the end of the track. A third song that uses strings to less success is Phantom Self. The riffing to me is just kind of lifeless and no embellishments, whether it's the strings or whether it's those tribal drums in the intro, can revive it for me. I don't like the basic 4-chord chorus, and I don't like the chugga chugga choo choo verses. Now, one last spot where Sepultura shake things up a bit is with the instrumental in the middle of the record, Iceberg Dances. Now, not to mention another prominent Brazilian metal guitarist, but a lot of these riffs sound like something that could be on a Kiko Loureiro solo album, like No Gravity or Sounds of Innocence. Because like I'm just the biggest fucking fan of Kiko solo stuff, and this track gives me that vibe in the best way possible. And there's just a lot of interesting things going on here, whether it's like those 80s hard rock riffs that come in about the 2-minute mark that makes this song feel like Dawkins' Mr. Scary in the middle of like a thrash record. And then those riffs are paired with like an organ, so it becomes this like Deep Purple meets Racer X vibe. And then there's a flamenco guitar section later on. It's a nice musical detour, and it really serves as like a extended interlude in a way. But then there are points where Machine Messiah is not too interesting for me. Like I mentioned, the song Phantom Self as a bit dull. Also the fourth track, Alethea, just doesn't have much to offer me. Some of the riffing really just feels like Meshuggah light. And you know, I can go to Destroy, Erase, Improve, or I can go to Chaos Fear if I want that style. There's also the closer, Cyber God, that I'm not crazy about, although that song does have some pretty sick parts, like that beautifully ugly guitar harmony in the final minute, or Derek Green's creepy Peter Steele style singing. And there's nothing on this record that I outright dislike. It's just these songs all have moments that drag for me. I do have to praise the production and the mix on this thing. It just has that modern thrash shine to it. That same shine the last few Testament records had. And I mean, the producer, Jens Bogren, like literally had a hand in all my favorite albums, so I'm not surprised. But yeah, Machine Messiah is definitely an album I can recommend if you like thrash metal and you like to hear it combined with maybe a bit of groove metal, a bit of industrial metal, a bit of a flair for the dramatic. You know, I'm by no means gushing or head over heels here, but this is a rock solid release from Sepultura 2.0, and we'll have to see if Overkill or Creator can out thrash them with their albums in the coming weeks. Machine Messiah gets a 7 out of 10 from me. As always, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, or shoot me a message so we can continue to talk music, and I'll see you guys soon.